Hello, and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the weekly companion podcast to the award-winning Classic Car newspaper. I'm this week's host, Chris Hope, features editor, and this time I'm joined by staff writer Jesse Billington, fresh from his 2-week break. Jesse, welcome back. How was the holiday?
Holiday was absolutely fantastic. 2 weeks away in Albania and Corfu, much needed sort of dose of summer sunshine, some brilliant sort of walking beach days, and bit of a motoring adventure that we'll sort of touch on in a bit. I know I've definitely got an hour classics to write off the back of it, which is quite interesting. I've sort of asked and answered some interesting questions across my holiday about my love for a certain type of car. So we'll get into that in a bit. But yeah.
What about cars spotted? Did you get any classic spotting done while you were out there?
I got a few classics spotted. Albania was great for a lot of 80s and 90s Mercedes, and Corfu was just a bit of an odd mix. Surprisingly big fans of the Jaguar X-Type in all of its many different stages of decay. And I've even managed to snap a picture of one that was very interestingly modified with a black vinyl roof, and then the rest of it was in sort of a sandy gold colour on some suspicious alloys with a very odd tailpipe setup. So yeah, there's also a Morris Marina pickup truck as well, a twin carb no less, which was sort of rotting back into the hillside somewhere up in the mountains. So yeah, plenty of interesting bits, and great fun retracing some of the routes from the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, most of which was filmed on the island. So just needed a 2CV for that.
Well, you've already driven one fairly recently, haven't you, sort of thing? So
yes.
I mean, we tend to think of sort of Malta as that sort of part of the world in terms of that a thriving classic car scene, but it does sound like there was bits and pieces there that sort of stand out.
Yeah, there was sort of. I don't think that they view them as classic cars. They're just simply cars that they're still. They're just old cars. They're still
Cuban
running.
fashion sort of thing. So
yes, yeah. There was you'd spot the odd British choice. There was a bit of a love for the Rover mark. Interesting enough, a lot of those sort of 90s noughties Rovers, 25s, 75s, 45s kicking around, as well as the MG siblings to those. Even spotted the odd MGF as well that was just sort of tucked in a garage, which I thought was quite a bold choice. But then again, you think lovely summer sunshine, roof back, you've got the fairly comfortable suspension to cope with the rather broken roads. You sort of put it together and you go, actually, maybe it's a wise choice. But it's an interesting one to go car spotting in. But you sort of, I think my girlfriend was quite forgiving of the fact that I spent most of the time counting Suzuki Jimneys and Samurais. We got 266 spotted across the entire 2-week holiday. So
okay,
I
can see why that was great for her, even as a classic car enthusiast myself, sort of thing. So
yes,
and it's been a little while since listeners have heard anything about your cars. How's the midget? How's its return to the road progressing?
Pretty well so far, actually. I was in the garage last night, so straight back to the grindstone, really, and was setting valve rocker tolerances, so getting those sort of properly sort of dialed in. So yeah, we're pretty close at the moment. I think I should be able to do the final sort of return sweep of those this evening, and then I'll have rocker cover will go on, and then I've just got to sort of do water pump, alternator, build up the intake manifold, and I should be able to sort of hopefully swing the engine into the car this weekend, which is great because we're sort of almost 20 days away from my sister's wedding, which I promised I'd have it ready for. So
so that's your hard deadline, isn't it? So.
Yeah, the original deadline was supposed to be drive it day, but fell a long way short of that. So the hard stop must be ready for my sister's wedding, and that is perilously close at the moment. So yeah, we're making good progress. Dad's been busy with the Mustang as well. He's had the auto sol out, been getting the chrome back up and shiny. So yeah, we've been busy in the workshop even in my absence.
Right. So the midget has a role in the wedding. The Mustang has a role in the wedding.
Yeah, they both got roles in the wedding. Obviously, the midget is just getting me and my girlfriend to it. The Mustang is the away car. I think I can say this because I don't think any of the guests particularly listen to the podcast, so I'm not officially giving away secrets. I know the Riley is the arrival at the wedding car. We've got some hot bus action.
The Riley, which Riley?
The Gamecock, the
That's right, okay.
the 12.4 drophead coupe is even further from being finished than my MG. And there's hot bus action. We've got a bus that's taking some guests from hotels to the wedding and to the reception. And I think that my mum and dad and the bridesmaid are leaving in a Morris Cowley Tourer. I
Okay.
think that's about it for interesting cars
I
that
mean,
are taking part.
how much say does the bride say in all of this, or is this things that the family as a whole have maybe sort of suggested is something that will be good to do?
A lot of this has been bride's say. A lot of this has been
Okay,
sort of
cool.
bride's choice. She wanted the Gamecock to feature. She wanted the Mustang to feature, and she sort of said she'd rather the MG feature than the Jimny, which is fair. It's sort of the
So it's a lesser of two evils.
it was more a case of it's more roof down on on a July summer's day, bedecked with ribbons and flowers. It's more fitting of the wedding celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so um she won't
Inky yellow
admit
is
it.
better than grey as a starting point,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
So
She won't admit it, but she does like cars, does my sister, but not in the same sort of overly enthusiastic sense that
overtly
you and I might do.
way.
She likes them for the aesthetic and the fact that they look nice and will take her places and sort of fit a certain aesthetic. But I think that's a fair enough reason to enjoy a piece of design, certainly, if we talk about it like that.
And what about you, Daly? How's the Jimny ticking over?
Yeah, ticking over, absolutely covered in tree sap where I left it parked outside my girlfriend's house for 2 weeks while I went on holiday. So it will get jet washed this weekend and brought back to a lovely shine. But yeah, so far so good. The brake work is holding up nicely. It stops on a dime, and yeah, despite the fact that I don't have a folding roof, I'm grateful it does have air conditioning because it's nice and toasty here in the UK still.
It's got its ticket for this year, isn't it? It's had its MOT.
Yes, yeah, it because it failed its MOT on the brakes being out of balance, which
Yeah.
started that whole debacle, which I do need to write up for an hour classic. So you will be able to read the full story on that in a soon to be issue of Classic Car Week.
He's not going to commit. He's got a midget to fix first before he thinks about doing any out of hours writing.
Yes, yeah, I'll try and get something whipped up this evening when I get back from the workshop. But yeah, relatively straightforward story, but finally solving a problem that I ought to have dealt with when it first reared its head about 2 years ago. So it's a cautionary tale for good preventative maintenance.
I mean, as so far as my mini's concerned, I'm afraid there's not been much to mention. It's done a couple of short runs after doing the London to Brighton Classic Car Run earlier this month. Other than that, though, there's not been much progress on many of the jobs that are on the to-do list. I still need to take a look at the inactive speedo. I'm hoping that replacing the speedo cable will be the long and short of that. However, getting that speedo cable out is proving to be a bit of a difficulty. I really don't want to start taking apart bits of the exhaust and the cooling system to get at it. So yeah, a bit of a head scratcher. I'm purposely sort of putting it off. I will have to have another look at it again. But yeah, until I get the speedo cable out and know which of 7 different versions of it I need to buy, I'm a bit stuck at the moment, sort of thing. But yeah, I will get to it eventually. But back to your holiday, Jesse, and I wanted to touch upon something that many of us have thought about doing, and perhaps it's something that some listeners have actually done, and that is to hire a classic car for use abroad. Jesse, you tell us a little bit about your experience. Why did you to decide to do it, firstly?
I think I did it sort of partly out of curiosity because I, I, we had a regular rental car while we'd been in Albania for doing the mountain passes, a diesel Ford Fiesta, done the trick perfectly fine, but sort of struggled to connect with it, and it was just sort of a means to an end to get to different places within the country. It's a perfectly sweet handling car, great for the little switchbacks, but you're sort of left feeling a bit flat. And if you are sort of a bit like me, one of those people that really enjoys personally connecting with a car and sort of finding the sort of soul and the mechanical sort of passion in it, then you sort of walk away from it just going, it was an car. It was quite literally a white good. It was just a white diesel Fiesta. But so returning to when we'd been in Corfu for the first 2 days, the best way to get to southern Albania, fly to Corfu, ferry across. We're sort of kicking around the ferry port waiting for the boat, and I just see sort of about 30 Jimneys just stacked up in the ferry port, all with sort of rental car stickers on the doors. And I'm thinking, we're sort of going to go around and explore the island a bit. We ought to get a rental car because the buses here are pretty terrible. So I sort of snap a quick picture of the door card on the side, and it just sort of says WhatsApp and the number for it to sort of basically text them to say if you'd
Yeah.
like a car. So fire off the message and think, oh, see if we can get hold of a Jimny, see if they've got one in stock. And sure enough, they message back, yep, we've got one available. When would you like it for? Yada yada, prices, times available, pickup locations,
Right.
drop offs, all the usual bits. And I sort of thinking, going to be weird experiencing my car, but from a completely different aspect, and also one that's maybe not been lavished with the same level of sort of care and refinement, one that's been sort of battered around on even worsely maintained roads than the British.
And
And
used by drivers that perhaps aren't quite as sympathetic as you are.
yes, yeah, and add into that, it's a
And I say
convertible.
sympathetic, knowing fine well that you did that Le Mans Dash this time last year with the limiter sort of bouncing off the rev counter. But yeah,
In between those moments of enthusiastic use, I do maintain the Jimny quite well. It goes for its annual service at a Suzuki dealership, and it gets properly looked after. But yeah, the sort of I was sort of like I want. Also, I'd never driven a convertible one, so sort of in
Yeah.
sort of north of 30-degree heat, which I mean is a weird brag because that was also the same temperature in the UK at that point in time. But sort of to have the roof back on the car, see if it just sort of feels like a different animal in a different setting. It was sort of an interesting sort of question, sort of soul and passion, and it was quite. There was a strange moment where sort of I wandered over, shook the guy's hand in the ferry port to pick up the car, and he goes, for the 19th through the 24th. And I was like, yes. And he opens the door, the key is in the ignition, so immediately the little bonger goes off. And I felt this strange pang of homesickness, immediately recognizing the electronic beep that my car does when you've left the key in the ignition. I go, oh, I don't think I really emotionally was so tied to my little Suzuki as this, but there we go. So yeah, then immediately sort of hop in and sort of ragging around, getting sort of money out from the cash point, heading over to their office, signing the paperwork, and then just sort of set loose into Corfu with sort of a car that I sort of half recognize. I'm sort of like everything visually looks exactly how it should be, but it's all mirrored. It's all on the wrong side of the car.
I'm going to say, yeah, sat on the wrong side. So
yeah, and sort of getting used to sort of shifting gear with the right hand and sort of thinking, does the shift feel better, or is it just because I'm not used to doing it with that hand?
Yeah.
The brakes, I will say though, are atrocious. It doesn't help that I've just been over and sort of overhauled most of the brakes on mine, but they were, yeah, it's like a long press of the pedal before you get anywhere close to slowing down, which once you've figured out how to apply that to Corfiot driving, makes perfect sense because the answer is nobody gives way to anyone, everyone gives way to everyone. So the solution is just if there's a gap, you just sort of keep trundling towards it. That also applies to stop junctions, that applies to roundabouts. You just sort of keep going. So yeah, it was interesting to sort of get a feel for a car that should ultimately be very familiar, but at the end of it just wasn't.
Used in a very different way. So
yes, yeah. But
I'm curious
back,
about sort of just general sort of documentation, because from the sound of it, it wasn't something that you decided you wanted to do ahead of time. So it was very much spur of the moment. What did you need with you? What did you need to provide in order to make it happen?
Just show a UK driving license and a fistful of euros. I think we were 70 euros a day to rent that, and that was about it pretty much, which is not unreasonable, especially when you add into it sort of like the sort of demand or fun factor of it being a more unique car as opposed to a sort of standard hatchback. So it was good fun, and also to have something that was perfectly suited to Corfu and going on the adventures, the mountain roads, and turning off the mountain roads onto the sort of gravel tracks and sort of exploring the back bits of Corfu was incredibly worthwhile. Plus just sort of my girlfriend really enjoyed it. It was sort of a comfortable place that we could sort of both relax and sort of potter about the place, and also I think it speaks a lot for sort of how sort of relaxed Corfu is, the fact that you could just leave it parked with the roof down with just sort of stuff strewn across the back seats to nip in and go and get a coffee, to go and get pastries from somewhere.
Yeah.
And come back and sort of there's 8 other cars also in a similar state and nobody's fussed. So it's sort of one of those things you sort of go, this is a lifestyle I could get quite easily used to. It's sort of much like when you sort of test a car or you see a car, you think you sort of do the stupid thing if you sort of open up Auto Trader or eBay to see what they're going for. And there's a bit in the back of my mind going, do I need a second Jimny? And would I like a convertible one? Because there is something fun about sort of getting in on a hot day, just doing the 2 catches at the front and just sort of chucking at least the front hatch back. And the fact that
have you just forgotten that you have an MG sports car? Is that what's basically happened? It's been off the road so long that you've actually just forgot. You know you're working on it. You know you're putting an engine on it, but you've just forgotten that distinction that it's actually going to result in something you can drive.
Yes, yeah. In the back of my mind, I know that I have a car whose roof is mostly affixed with 2 latches, Velcro, and poppers. So it's functionally the same basic idea. It's a car that legitimately only really seats 2 people in any great deal of comfort. So they're 2 basically the same thing. things, but I don't know, it's just one of those things that maybe it was just sort of a yearning of the heart for a car made mostly of Velcro and rust. So it was sort of I don't know, perhaps it sort of scratched an itch that was actually just longing for my MG to get back on the road. But yeah, it was great fun chucking it down gravel tracks, and obviously over the mountain roads they've got something called Trompeter Pass, which runs over the highest sort of point in Corfu, and it's named that for literally the fact that sort of it looks like the pipework of a trumpet sort of looping in around on itself. And sort of on the switchback hairpins, the incredibly dry rotted, hard sun bleached tires. If you were particularly gutsy with throttle deployment on the exit of a hairpin, you'd spin up the inside wheel as sort of the open diff at the rear axle just sort of goes all power to the best possible route. And obviously where the car's leaning over, it's unloading the inside tyre, so it just sort of dumps all of its power to one bit, and you just sort of slew out of the hairpin in sort of like a 5 mile an hour sort of fish tanker. And you're sort of like, well, this was a bit fun, and then sort of wiggle off up the road again.
It sounds like you purposely didn't look at the date stamps on the tyres.
I think they'd long been bleached off by the sun. They'd crumbled away to dust. The worst one was the one on the rear, because obviously that is offered no shade throughout its entire life. And I've seen Lego tires chewed by children that were in better condition.
Excellent. Okay.
So I was like, I hope we do not need that in place of a puncture. That's going to be sketchy. We did have the engine management light came on at one point, and we did have an interesting tappet for one of the valve rockers as well, which was best solved by buying a small litre bottle of oil, chucking half of that into the engine, and which tamped down the valve noise quite significantly, and a bit of an Italian tune-up seemed to clear through the engine fault as well. So yeah, ultimately I can argue that the car was returned to the hire car company
in better condition.
In better condition, yes. Yeah. Even if the right-hand indicator didn't work, but that seemed sort of not too great a problem for anyone at all on Corfu. Was again, indicators quite optional.
I mean, beyond just the general condition of sort of the car that you've sort of talked about, did you have any concerns about the experience? I mean, even those concerns that proved to be unfounded.
I don't really think there was any sort of concerns from it. It was the whole process was relatively straightforward. There were no sort of major hurdles to it. You never felt unsafe about it. You never felt sort of concerned that the car was never going to sort of last the entire duration of your trip. Yeah, the only sort of odd part was we'd sort of said, oh, can we drop it off at the airport? And naturally assume a hire car company will have like a small little sort of corner of a car park where you can go and drop it off. They'll check around the car when you hand it back. They said, yeah, sure, we can have someone meet you at the airport. And I was like, okay, that sounds like the normal stage of this plan. So head off to the airport on our final day, and we get there and we're like, well, there's one for like all the usual companies, your Avises and so on and so forth. And we're sort of thinking, okay, where's our guys? So we just sort of end up doing laps and laps and laps of the airport forecourt, just sort of going round and round and round until we spot another Jimny with the badge on the side. And we're like, oh, they've got loads of paperwork on the dash. They must be here to pick us up. So they buzz down their window and just go, Terminal C. And we sort of follow. And we're like, follow them over to Terminal C. Hop out, the woman comes over and sort of she goes, all good? And I go, yeah, right hand indicator doesn't work, but all good. And she goes, cool, keys. And I just give her the keys and off they go. I'm like, fine. I guess that's the end of that then. Clearly they sort of give it the once over just to check that all the main parts are still attached to the car and go, yeah. Thank you. I was like, okay, this was actually, if you forgive its sort of Greek nature, incredibly easy. I'd recommend doing it if you do find yourself going on holiday to Corfu this summer. I recommend it. Contemplate renting a Jimny. It's a great way to experience them without having to ever deal with the foibles of living with them. And yeah, it's the perfect car for those roads. Every now and then you sort of have the perfect car for a scenario, and I've always argued that my MG going through the Lake District in a frozen October was perfect because the narrow, tight, winding lanes, I don't have to worry about it overheating. It was perfectly sized for the environment. There was no one else out there. It's one of those perfect sort of car for the perfect moment. Quiet back roads of Corfu, roof down on a Jimny. The temperature is just starting to come down. You can smell sort of all the rich trees and foliage that are sort of relaxing into the evening and releasing the sort of natural perfumes. It's sort of one of those moments that you sort of, if you were a travel writer, you would write about it in great detail. If you're a motoring journalist, you just go, it was nice to have the roof down and be able to experience the world around you a bit more.
Yeah.
You could be poetic about it if you wanted.
I mean, the closest thing that I've ever done to anything like this, I did a Fiat 500 experience sort of drive around Rome. I was watching Richard Adewardi's Travel Man on Channel 4, and I basically just booked it immediately afterwards because we were going in a couple of months' time, sort of thing. So, and yeah, I mean, exactly what you just sort of said, perfect car for the perfect environment. It was quite intimate. It was just my wife and I with a guide in two cars, and we just sort of followed him along a route that took us to sort of the major sites. But he did the usual thing of like taking us down these sort of roads that you're pretty sure are just pathways for pedestrians, sort of thing, and just sort of marveling at this idea you can get this like really sort of small car down all of these sort of like twisting alleys and narrow sort of passageways and things like that, sort of thing. But no, it was absolutely ideal for what it was, sort of thing. I mean, it had been upgraded. I'm not sure about the specifics. I'm pretty sure it had 5 gears from what I remember. So it's definitely had a different engine and gearbox in it, maybe something for 126 or something like that. But it was quite user friendly, quite slack with it, as you can imagine, given that it's something that's used by tourists that perhaps haven't sort of driven sort of Fiat 500 before. But yeah, it was easily one of the highlights of that sort of 3-day city break sort of thing. So it was a couple of hours, and sort of I think it started at like sort of 3-4 in the afternoon. So it was getting quite sort of dusky sort of as we sort of came to an end of it, sort of thing, looking down across Rome. So from some sort of the heights, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, and I sort of really enjoyed it, sort of thing. So yeah, I think if listeners haven't sort of done anything along those lines, done rented a car for a period of time like Jesse has, or even just an experience like me, I think it's definitely something that we can recommend, isn't it? So with no real sort of drawbacks, there's no real sort of headaches that to really sort of worry about. I don't remember mine being especially expensive either. And at €70, yours sounds like it was an absolute steal.
Yeah, for what it unlocked as part of sort of the event, if you think of it just on purely what it unlocked for us to be able to do across the holiday, absolutely perfect. The fact that we were able to get around, we had a car that could take us to the olive groves, it could take us to the quiet beaches, it could take us right up into the mountains to go hiking. It was absolutely spot on. But then for sort of the additional sort of points from a motoring journalist point of view, from a car enthusiast point of view, it was sort of had these great additional bits. You could just rent a regular hatchback if you wanted to, it would do the trick. But to do it in a car that I really enjoyed, I can't recommend that enough. And if you do get a chance to go on holiday and spot something a bit more interesting, or go to the smaller hire car companies, see what they've got kicking around, there might be something a bit more sort of interesting, even if you're sort of heading off to sort of a relatively sort of well-trodden location. Shop around, find something a bit different, and make the most of it. Because I think if you like me really enjoy sort of the passion, the soul, the sort of feel of how a car sort of fits within its environment, that sort of scenario is it's indelible from the memory, really. And I think we'll look back at that and go, that was great fun, especially sort of in the middle of sort of driving along a road, and then you look down and Apple Maps goes, and turn left here, and you sort of turn left onto the first bit, and then it's sort of tarmacked for sort of 10 meters, and then it's sort of concreted for another 10, and then it just sort of stops, and you're like, this can't be the main road across Corfu. And you're sort of looking at going, but it's clearly marked out as the main road across Corfu on the map, so we'll just keep following this. And then it starts to go uphill. So sort of in the chimney, you just sort of press 4-wheel drive and off you go. And you sort of think it's getting a bit steeper still, so you press the low range button and off you go still. And then eventually you just sort of pop out onto a tarmac road and you go, okay, I guess that was the main road.
It's a road that involved a little bit of green laning, that's all.
Yeah, so they were, again, the car's perfectly set up for its environment, or the environment's perfectly tailored to that car. Either way, you have an absolutely brilliant time, and it's one of those things that sort of is as good for the soul as simply sitting on a beach reading sort of Master and Commander.
Anyway, let's move on, because we've got a massive road tester in this week's issue. Jesse, you got the opportunity to drive a series of different Lotus Esprits. How did that come about, and why is it that this year is an important one for Hethel's sports car?
The come about of this one was sort of, it's one of those sort of true motoring journalist stories of just sort of your phone rings and someone asks you, would you like to come to Silverstone and drive 4 Lotus Esprits? And there's sort of a bit in the back of your mind that goes, sure, what's the catch? And this is all ahead of Silverstone Festival later this year. So obviously Silverstone Festival, brilliant coming together of car clubs, car displays, motor racing, music, the full sort of shebang. one of the big parts of the event is between the racing, they have parades from classic car
Yeah.
clubs and classic organizations that showcase cars that are reaching major milestones, clubs that are reaching major milestones as well. And this year they are celebrating the Jaguar XJS, which you've written a brilliant feature about quite a few issues back, which is marking 50 years since its launch, isn't it? And the
That's right.
same for essentially it's the launch of the Lotus Esprit later this year at what
Yeah.
would have been the Paris Motor Show.
Yeah.
So they've sort of combined the two to sort of do like a best of British sort of rivalry, and also two cars that were really quite pivotal in sort of saving their marks as well at the time. So they've sort of been sort of leading with this as part of their sort of material, and the sort of media coordinator for the event sort of said, look, do you want to come along and drive the cars while I've got them at Silverstone? You can get a feature out of it as well. And sort of obviously for them, it's a great chance to mention Silverstone Festival. So sort of I go, yeah, sure. And I was like, what have you got? And he goes, oh, we'll try and get sort of at least one from every generation and up to sort of hopefully try and get four. There's a bit in the back of my mind going, oh, this is going to be quite interesting.
Mm.
So headlong to Silverstone. I've been given basically half of the Silverstone circuit to myself and four Lotus Esprits to sort of play with for the day, which sort of if you ask sort of 12-year-old me what my ideal day out for a job would be, I don't think I'd even get close to coming up with that as an idea. So we had an S1, an S2.2, an S3, and a later GT3 as well. So four interesting sort of marker points in the evolution of the Esprit. The S1 and the S2.2 had both been restored by the same family. Very, very detailed, sort of full back to bare metal, back to the sort of iframe of these cars, and then built up with exacting detail. And yeah, the work that this sort of father and son have put into restoring Esprits is sort of unrivaled, really. I'd love to sort of do a deeper dive into sort of how they do it. It's sort of almost a prime classic car magazine feature.
I mean, all four of them were owned as cars. They
Yes,
weren't
yeah,
supplied by dealers or auction companies or anything like that. They
yeah.
were sort of, the pride and joy of these four owners sort of thing. So
Yeah, the S3 had even driven up from London that morning. So yeah, they were all sort of drivers' cars. They were all cars that are regularly driven and enjoyed. The S2.2 had not long been restored as well. So it was sort of, he was still sort of gently bedding it in. So that one wasn't quite sort of pushed to its limits around Silverstone to find its handling sort of nous. But yeah, it was an interesting one to do, and an even more interesting one to sort of write and try and pick apart. Certainly the S1, the 2.2, and the 3, sort of the evolution in the car from the driver's seat. It's easy to write about the history of it, delve into the history, the evolution
yeah,
of the cars, how they were changed to meet different regulations, different market trends. But to then try and sort of pick apart three cars that mechanically haven't changed a great deal, but you sort of there is a difference, and it's really interesting how those differences manifest. The GT3 is the most markedly different of the bunch
yeah,
because of the
yeah.
nature of the evolutionary step that it took to get to that point. And it was also just a phenomenal car to have. Again, the perfect car for a race circuit is that GT3 because it's so manageable. It has a huge amount more power, a lot more speed, a lot more sort of capability to be an out and out supercar. But the chassis, you are still aware that it's basically the original S1 chassis that's been sort of modified over the years, but it's still so tractable. It still has this great sort of fluidity and responsiveness in the way that it communicates what it's doing, means that you can really deploy its power and its capability a lot more readily. So it was an interesting shoot to do and a great experience to be sort of privy to, as well as then a very interesting thing to write later on as well, to sort of go back through the pictures and look at it and think, why did this one feel the way it did? Why, listening back to like my audio notes that I've taken while I've been doing the laps and afterwards, and think, why did this one sort of behave the way it did? What sort of would have led to the development to make it behave this way? So it's
Yeah.
a great one to sort of test your mettle as a sort of as a journalist, or a sort of one with a finessed bum to sort of
I
feel
think
it.
it was maybe one of those where you had to sort of, just sort of cut through the adrenaline because you've been on such a high doing it that you actually have to sort of pick apart the emotions to actually get those nuggets of information that you actually want. So
Yes, yeah, you have to sort of put aside the fact that you've got half of Silverstone and a white S1 Lotus Esprit on lovely shiny wolf race wheels, and sort of put aside the fact that you're not Roger Moore, second Roger Moore reference at the podcast, and sort of focus intently on sort of the way the car feels, and sort of speaking to the owners about sort of the evolution of them. And the two chaps that had done the restorations on most of these cars were so incredibly sort of brushed up on the history of these cars and the development that led to them. They were sort of fonts of knowledge that are incredible to sort of tap into while I was there, and sort of came out to be sort of very useful when I was writing the story later on as well. So it was a great thing to do, and obviously all the cars are going to be at Silverstone Festival later this year. They're going to be taking part in the parade. There's going to be plenty more Lotus Esprits there, as well as you said XJSs. There's a whole bunch of other clubs that are going to be taking part. So it's lining up to be an absolutely fantastic sort of showcase, and wholeheartedly recommend it. And please go and read the piece as well. I enjoyed writing that one. So
100%. So the Silverstone Festival, I've got the dates. It's the 22nd to the 24th of August. Tickets are still on sale, so no issues there. You can go and have a look at various packages. I think they even had sort of camping options that you can sort of look at if you want to sort of spend multiple days there. Jesse, I mean, obviously, with you in awe of these Esprits, but I mean, actually being on Silverstone track, for many people, it's something that's almost along the lines of a bucket list sort of thing that they want to tick off. I mean, what is it like being on a Formula One circuit, sort of driving cars?
It definitely feels special. I've done a couple of sort of driving bits at Silverstone quite a few years ago. 2020 it must have been. I did the lap of lights with my dad. Obviously, very little was able to go on during the COVID pandemic. So obviously Silverstone thought, well, what if we just chucked a hell of a lot of fairy lights all over the gaff and let people do a lap in their own car? So we did that in my mum's Astra convertible, for something to do, just to sort of say we'd done a lap of Silverstone. It was good fun. And then when I'd got the MG, the first year I took it to Silverstone Festival with the Midget and Sprite Club, second year we did a parade lap with Midget and Sprite Club. So I was able to sort of say I've driven my MG around Silverstone, and then to sort of have, with no speed limits in place, and sort of basically heart the sort of national circuit to myself, just sort of absolutely give it some Lotus Esprits. It feels properly special. And
does it feel wide?
It feels incredibly wide. Yes. Yeah. Especially in sort of a compact sort of classic car, you forget how big modern cars are, and modern F1 cars are. Certainly in a classic sports car, you are diminutive in the grounds of the circuit. So you've got a lot of space to really sort of play with a line, and you almost find yourself, because you're so small, you can sort of straight line and carry a lot more speed and a lot more of a flowing line. But coming through sort of cops and sort of downshifting and braking a bit, and trailing a brake into cops to then sort of power it into Maggots Beckett's, like some of the most iconic corners on the motor racing calendar. You sort of feel a little bit special, especially as you perfectly notch a shift in a Lotus. You're like, oh, that felt good. And you come away from it with an absolutely huge smile. And I can't say in great detail anything else on this. I'll have to sort of fill in the gaps on this after the British Grand Prix, but we didn't have the circuit entirely to ourselves, as Sky F1 were there doing a sort of pre-Grand Prix VT package. You'll be able to see the drivers and cars that are involved in it. Obviously, Formula One is celebrating 75 years of its history at the moment, so that'll give you a clue as to potentially what they're up to. I can say that much. The rest of it I can't tell you, and I can't show you any of the pictures that I captured, but let it be known that some of the drivers involved in that Sky VT package were significantly distracted by the Lotuses on offer, and did sort of potter off down the pit lane and sort of come and sort of basically interrupt halfway through. So I do have some excellent photographs of that. But that's something I can speak about after next weekend, which is the British Grand Prix, first weekend of July. So I'll be able to fill in those gaps there, unless you've watched all the sort of Sky package ahead of that. But yes, it was one of those true sort of pinch yourself days at work. And for me also, it timed in perfectly with, I think, with the 3rd anniversary of me being a CCW. So I was like, this is a perfect treat to myself. I've had a perfectly wonderful June, and it's one of those months that's going to be hard to talk about without sounding incredibly smug.
Well, I know there's loads more that we could talk about, not least maybe sort of trying to press you on some of those details you mentioned, mate. But okay, so one last thing before we do call it a day, and that's that I wanted to preview some of the things that we can expect in next week's issue. We've got a buying guide on the 2nd generation Range Rover, which when bought right can offer some quite phenomenal value for money. We look back at why more and more modern classics are being used as daily drivers, while the way we were seen from yesteryear this time looks at Sheffield High Street in 1964. So Jesse, thank you very much for joining us, telling us about your holiday and also some incredible sort of driving in Esprits and Jimneys and much more besides. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you. I feel like the sort of luckiest man in the job because obviously next week, James Sadlier, our managing editor, and I are off to Le Mans Classic as well. So, yeah, it's an absolutely sort of plum series of months for me. Really, I cannot complain from where I sit.
We look forward to bringing you more next time. The issue we'll be covering will be on sale 2nd of July.
Yeah, plenty to enjoy in that. A to Z of Fiat as well, which is always a lovely dive.
Yes, so that's marking another big milestone anniversary, looking at all the various sort of cars that have been produced over the years, with some really sort of interesting nuggets of information that have been turned out by one of our more accomplished contributors, Richard Gunn. Leave it there.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we've got plenty to get on with ahead of that issue, so I shall leave you to crack on, Chris.
No worries. Catch you in a bit. Thank you, Jesse.
Bye.